On Twitter, I've noticed that there's this trend, and I keep seeing it more and more, and it's this thought that like, hey, churches don't need to be listening to entrepreneurs or coaches. We need the church to be less entrepreneurial in a sense. I think we need more, because when I look at churches that are struggling, 99% of the time, they are not struggling because of theology reasons or spiritual reasons. They are struggling because of organizational and leadership issues.
Gotcha.
100%.
If you had to start over tomorrow, you're going to plant a church and you have a budget to hire people, what roles would you hire first?
Man, I want to hire the...
A pastor will generally hire those 3 roles. But those 3 roles in and of themselves, they're their own little sub ministries, if you will.
Okay.
And they need that sort of visionary leader. Hey guys, welcome. We are going to be talking about talking about ministry, talking about church, and you guys can observe. Hope you're having a good day. Hope you're having a great. It's around lunchtime for us.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
hungry.
I haven't eaten yet, so we're going to get through this really quickly so we can eat.
We promise we feed the talent, guys. Promise we feed the talent. Let me ask you guys something. So I've been seeing on a trend on Twitter. This is another topic, by the way.
And that's what we're doing today, right? Like we're just chatting.
Yeah,
we're just chatting.
We're just chill. So on Twitter, I've noticed that there's this trend, and I keep seeing it more and more. And it's this thought that like, hey, churches don't need to be listening to entrepreneurs or coaches. We need less entrepreneurs and coaches in the church advising pastors. We need the church to be less entrepreneurial in a sense.
Okay.
And I actually think we need the opposite.
Okay.
So agree or disagree. I think we need more, because when I look at churches that are struggling, 99% of the time, they are not struggling because of theology reasons or spiritual reasons. They are struggling because of organizational and leadership issues.
Gotcha.
100%.
Okay.
100%. My dad was a full-time evangelist for over a decade. We traveled. We saw a lot of churches, new church almost every week. And I was telling someone the other day, you'd walk, and you drive up to a big building, and you'd think, okay, we're actually going to get paid this week. And, we've actually been paid in Army rations before from churches, which is a whole nother story.
Wait. You've been paid in Army rations?
Yeah, food rations.
Like MRIs type stuff?
Yes, MREs.
REs?
Yeah, MREs,
Wow.
like literally.
Whoa.
Or we've been paid in freezer burnt food as well.
So your family traveled the United States
For over a decade. Yes.
And they paid you in like astronaut food?
Literally.
That is incredible.
Literally.
I've never heard that, bro. That's crazy.
So, listen, take care of your guest speakers.
Yes.
They do have bills to pay. They are real people.
I bet Golden Corral was a treat.
Right. There's a reason my dad had to resell and load up hay during that time as an entrepreneur on the side to just supplement,
Sure.
church. You spend 7 days at a church, 5, 6, 7 days at a church.
Bro, most churches got like those ladies in the church who can cook spaghetti. And
Yeah,
y'all got
at least
astronaut
make
food.
like a homemade.
Come on.
I don't know. Anyway, but you would pull up to a big church and you think, we're going to walk in here. We're going to get paid this week. We're going to get fed this week.
Yeah.
The church is going to be excited. The move of God's going to take place. It's going to be a real week of spiritual renewal for people.
Right.
And you walk in the door of this big church and there's like 20 people barely scattered throughout and the church is declining. And you look at what the pastor does all week, and he does the pastory things, right? He goes to the hospital, but no leadership, no structure. So-and-so just shows up and sings a couple songs and there's no organization to it. There's no real leadership. There's no process. What do you do when a first-time guest walks? I don't know. We just hope they come back. I would say that was a massive a trend.
Yeah, wow.
In walking into churches.
More than one.
They just do church on the weekend and they just do church on Wednesday nights and they just do what happens in that hour and a half time block. But throughout the rest of the week, there is no process. There is no structure. There's no forward thinking.
Wow.
A complete lack of it.
So you're suggesting more entrepreneurial efforts?
Yeah, well,
mindset, right?
Yeah,
Gotcha.
Mindset. I mean, we lead a team here. We have a dozen people or so, a few dozen contractors that we're working with. And all the problems that I have experienced as a leader of a small business serving churches, I see those same exact issues, the same exact struggles that I have and have had the past 10, 12 years. I see pastors experiencing those same issues. I think the difference is, even though I had a background in ministry, I was able to not view everything through a completely spiritual lens. But I think there's this temptation when you're in ministry to view everything through this spiritual lens or a theological lens. And it really, I would say, dampens your ability to problem solve at an organizational level when everything is viewed through this spiritual lens. Because I don't believe most of the problems that churches are experiencing today are theological or even spiritual. They are organizational. They are leadership problems. I don't know. Agree or disagree?
Yeah. So I'll only push back a little bit, and I'll say, I think the Bible has incredible insight. So I know you're not saying, we don't need more of the Bible. We don't need more of Jesus. Yeah. That's not what you're saying. But I think the temptation that you said that guys only make it spiritual. And I don't think it's an or. I think it's an and. I think they just don't add the and. They only see. And I think that's what fair. You're saying.
That's fair.
But because I think the scriptures have tons to say. I mean, Moses wouldn't have been a successful leader. Exactly. If his father-in-law didn't be like, dude, you're killing yourself, man. You need to set up. We go to the book of Acts. Yeah, you go to the book of Acts and they're getting in trouble for the organizational style, and the church almost doesn't keep moving forward. And the apostles are like, no, okay, we got to appoint men and we got to break this up and we got to create a system in place. So I think the Bible, and maybe they've just, omit the fact that the Bible has those principles in it. I think a lot of things that are entrepreneurial are really apostolic, and we just need to see them as that and not be opposed to seeing them as that. So that's the only pushback. I do agree, like systems are missing, and that helps when you've got people coming to your church, you're following up and all the stuff that we've talked about before in this room about systems and stuff. But
why do you think that sentiment seems to be on the rise? Like we need less. We don't need entrepreneurs or coaches to be advising pastors on how to run their church.
It's a good question.
Where do you think that comes from? Like I
don't know. We've gone decades without it, and now it's here, and churches are starting to flourish and grow and put things in place. So is it like we're afraid of change, or we view that as a worldly mindset, or
a professional pastor?
Yeah, sure. You're just doing it to be more successful.
The role of the pastor has changed a lot in the past 30 years.
It has.
Right?
Sure. You're not just the guy going to the hospital and mowing grass in your dress shoes.
Yeah. You're not just preaching. That's your primary function. And like you said, hospital visitation or hospitality. But it's changed a lot, at least in America.
Sure. Maybe it is because, and again, I'm not just going to play devil's advocate all day, but could it have been because we saw and we've seen some of the mega church pastor who ran the church like a business, and we're like, we don't want anything to do with that. Could it, maybe the celebrity side or what we only see? I don't know. Could it be that
there's this sort of
fear of that
disdain or resentment towards that, and it's sort of like, we run the opposite.
So direction. We throw everything out with that. He was a leader. We don't want anything to do with leadership. He was organized. We don't want anything to do with organization. Maybe it's been some of that.
I mean, humans in general are like that. I mean, we have Republicans and Democrats, and there's always this fear mongering, right? But like, the pendulum swings back and forth for every generation, every decade. On both sides, yep. It always goes back and forth because there's this. We have a Democratic president for 8 years, and then all of a sudden, the people, the United States, we gotta get a Republican. Like we just swing back and forth. I think just by nature.
Yeah, I think so. Those extremes, and so maybe that's what it is that we've pinned the practices and the principles of entrepreneurial leadership and organizational leadership as the fall of these guys. And so we're like, we're going to just leave all that and maybe overgeneralize some of that.
Well, let me ask you this, and this is kind of going along the same lines, but this is sort of a subtopic. When it comes to hiring, I think hiring is one of the issues that I've noticed with churches that I think is an issue that can be addressed in a way that adds a lot of value to the church. But let me ask you guys this question. What are if you said the three most prominent hires outside the lead pastor, what are those three hires?
Worship, kids, and youth.
Yeah, right? Worship, kids, and youth?
Worship for sure,
100%. In any order, right?
Yeah.
In any
next
order.
gen, yeah.
Whichever one shows up with the talent first, you get the job.
Whichever one is ready to go.
Yeah.
I agree. I think the same thing. I think one of the issues that I've noticed or observed in the past, year or two, is that churches, a pastor will generally hire those three roles. But those three roles in and of themselves, they're their own little sub ministries, if you will.
Okay.
And they need that sort of visionary leader. Because the pastor is really not, the lead pastor is not bringing a ton of vision to the kids ministry week in, week out, right?
Okay.
Maybe he may have an umbrella ministry or a vision, but he's not bringing a vision. So you need that sort of public figure, if you will, at a kids ministry position, youth ministry, and even the worship from like a creative standpoint, and just leading the band and the worship team and all of that. I think one of the issues is, though, when you hire those roles, if you're hiring a youth pastor, a lot of times a youth pastor, even a kids pastor, they are less experienced versions of the lead pastor. They are redundant in a way.
Okay.
And it's just the nature of the beast, right? We need the guy, right? Or the gal that's going to lead the youth ministry. They've almost got to be this mini pastor within this larger organizational
it's just a smaller version
system. Yeah. And I think one of the issues is, if you're a small church and you're needing to just get things done, you're at that place where you need stuff done, you need systems and processes. When you hire another visionary. So let's just say, if we could classify church roles or people in general in three categories: your visionary, which, typically is your lead pastor. It has to be, honestly. You are responsible for the big vision of the church, what you felt like God has promised for your church in that community. You have operators, which operators really, they just get things done.
Sure.
They're able to just, they don't want anything to do with the vision. They just want you to tell them their marching orders, and they go and do. And then you have processors who really install these systems and these structures that can stabilize growth or stabilize those activities, again, that support the vision. So you have visionary, you have operator, and you have processor.
Yeah.
What I see churches doing is they're hiring lots of visionaries.
Gotcha.
Their lead pastor is a visionary.
Heavy visionaries.
The youth pastor is a visionary.
Gotcha.
Kids pastor,
massive event.
And I'm painting a broad brush here, but I think in my observation, not every church, but most churches, I see this. The kids pastor is a visionary.
Yeah.
They need that personality, right?
Sure.
We're a personality driven, I don't know if you call
beings.
it.
We like to follow people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the worship pastor usually is some sort of personality. So you've got creative people, vision people. So you got 4 visionaries at a small church, lots of vision, lots of ideas.
Yeah.
But not a lot gets done.
Frustrated when no one's doing all the things.
Yeah. And so when I look at churches that are struggling, I think a lot of times it has to do with that organizational structure and who they are hiring. And it might be that pastors, and agree to disagree, lead pastor should hire an operator, an integrator. If you're familiar with an EOS, Entrepreneurial Operating System, I believe it's called, there's this pairing of like the visionary and the integrator. The integrator is like an operator, and basically they take the lead pastor's vision and they go fulfill it. And then of course later on you add that sort of scaffolding as far as architecture, systems, processes with a processor person. So agree or disagree that pastors, maybe if you're going to hire youth pastor, youth ministry is important. Kids ministry is important. Worship ministry is important. Yeah. But perhaps we should rethink, if you're a pastor, who you hire first. Maybe you should hire someone that's an executive assistant for you that can help you be organized. Yeah. Or help the church, the staff be organized. Sure. I don't know. What thoughts?
Hey, I'll tell you personally why. What's the people called? Sorry. Prosecute? No.
The prosecutors.
Yeah, processors.
Processors, like prosecutors. And I jokingly say prosecutors. I think a lot of times, so I'll answer that broadly. I think I'm in agreement with that. Early on in the church, what helps the church continue to grow is the scaffolding. You can't have, the church won't grow beyond its systems. It will just live and die within that means. So I definitely agree. If you're going to continue to expand, you've got to have the systems to expand with you. So if you don't have the person doing that, I'll go with you there. But I almost want to speak into why we avoid those people, because processors think and they poke holes in things. Yeah. And so sometimes we see that person as like a burden, like sister so-and-so comes and tells me, and the visionary is like, go. And I'm a persecutor every time. Processor says, well, before you go,
of the vision.
exactly. Like that's how it feels. And so that could be why we see this repetitive nature in churches, because those processors, they push back a little bit and they say, we're not ready for that. And we can't, if you're going to have this big event and we don't have parking and we don't have a system to include the kids and getting them checked in and like it can almost feel like they're anti-vision, anti what we're trying to do. And so I think that's why they don't make it on the team, to be honest with you. We don't value them as the visionary.
Well, I will say Les McEwen in his book, Predictable Success, talks about the visionary operator processor. And he does say that getting a lot of processors too early does stifle innovation, creativity. That you need them.
Too risk adverse.
You basically need to bring in processors when it gets to the point where like growth cannot happen without structure.
Yeah.
If you have too much structure, too much rigidity early on, then it prohibits growth. So his suggestion is like you need a strong vision and then lots of operators at first, and then maybe a processor. And he said the great organizations will sort of like this, the bell curve, if you will. A lot of times an organization will they'll grow, and then they'll peak. And then they begin this slow, and we talked about this with Pastor Ryan, this like slow.
Jesus bell curve.
Decades of declining, right? Or a plateau.
Yeah.
And he says the great organizations will waffle back and forth between adding more operators, adding more processors, adding more, installing more vision. And you're just kind of going back and forth, because if you have too many operators or processors, what happens is it stifles all of that creativity in the name of stability, in the name of
what's safe and
preservation.
Preservation, avoiding liabilities, and that begins the slow decline.
Sure.
But for what we're talking about, for a small church, you really just need to get stuff done.
Yeah, you do. You do.
You just need to get.
Jesus saw that. He said, "The harvest is plenty, but the workers are few." Like, they're there.
Great big vision.
Yeah.
No one to do
the work. Back to Jethro.
Yep.
When Jethro comes to visit Moses, they've got a lot of people.
Got a lot going on,
They've been doing a lot. They've been traveling. Jethro is like a processor. He comes in and says, "Hey, you need to do this," and that was such like sage advice for wisdom,
right?
Or excuse me, for Moses. It was just such wonderful advice. And so having a processor was a godsend thing for Moses in that moment. You're talking about thousands of people. So it was interesting.
But it works in a small setting too. We're doing it in our church plant right now, where we grew to COVID, to 60, 70 people. COVID happened. We're down to like one family, and then we got to rebuild as a church. And you can't just rebuild a church based off really great preaching and good music and a good children's experience on Sundays. We found that when people started coming, and when we would plug them into areas of service and give ownership over things, they were more faithful. They showed up more frequently. Sure. Others stopped seeing the pastor and his family as the people in charge, right? Because we don't want to be seen as that. As my dad's the pastor, and I'm on staff, and my sister's on staff. Yeah, we're leading our things, but now we've got teams. Sure. And it's the whole idea of leading hundreds, leading tens, whatever, down. Hey, John, you have a vision for this, right? I see you. I'm going to put you over that. Yeah. And now that area of ministry is growing, because we're not having to grow all of these areas of ministry. We can cast a bigger vision and put implementers. This guy was an executive, at a major airline. He's very good at process. He's very good with people. He's very good at strategy. Grow it, man. Sure. Do your thing. Bring your ideas to us if you need to. Otherwise, run with it. Gotcha. And we're seeing the church grow again. And we're, having to put out chairs on Sunday morning, because that's incredible. There's just like this idea of we're finally to that stage where, we need systems. We need to empower other people. And when you do that, your church just starts doing that again. And now we're going to get to the point where we need fresh vision again. Yeah. And we'll do the waffle. We'll go back and forth.
Yeah. So was there like this, like, we don't value that? Why do you feel like that was?
I think anytime you start something, and if a new pastor comes in town, maybe it's the same, but especially planning a church, there's this fear of letting go. Yeah. Of God gave you a vision, and you feel almost like a sense of responsibility. I think that it's on my shoulders. Sure. If this thing grows,
if it fails or successes,
and if it fails, either way, it's on me. Yep. And so you're like, well, I just need to be a part of it all.
Gotcha. So yeah, so just that's the.
And then my dad made a comment 2 Sundays ago. He said, I was looking around and thinking, if I didn't show up this morning, this church would have been just fine without me.
Gotcha.
And like, that's a really cool place to be as a pastor. That's a very freeing place to be as a pastor, to walk in on Sunday and go, wow, you guys already have like coffee out. You've already got signs out, flags up, tent, whatever you got going on.
Yeah.
Fresh cards in the backs of chairs. The place is clean. Ministry people are in there getting ready for kids spaces. Like, I didn't have to do anything but show up today and preach what God gave me. That's a very freeing place.
Yeah, it is. I need to get there.
You can do it.
I need to get there. You
can do it.
I still vacuum sometimes, you gotta, I know he does too.
Absolutely.
I get it.
Mike, let me ask you this. So you have a great team, by the way. So
they're all right. We love
Put that aside. Put that aside.
Yeah.
If you had to start over tomorrow, you're going to plant a church and you have a budget to hire people, what roles would you hire first?
Man, I want to hire the processors. But again, I think in my routine of it, I still would think I got to get a worship guy and a kids guy in. I feel like I would make that same mistake. And sorry, that sounded terrible. Like my guys are not a mistake because we have a worship and a kids guy. Yeah. Not a mistake.
Disregard your guys.
Forget about those guys.
Yeah. You guys got a great team.
What I always had and I didn't realize I had was an executive. And so he's been a processor for me since day one. And I think I took me a while to value him as that. Yeah. But now looking back, he was really my first staff. Like he was there. He didn't get. So he wasn't staff because he didn't get paid for a long time. So I probably should have said, you're worth your weight in gold. And I think I was learning as a lead pastor how valuable this position was. And of course, I figured that out much later in this process because we are a successful church because of the systems that he's put in place as a processor.
Mm-hmm. I also think too that as a pastor is growing as a leader, I mean, we're all still growing, right? I'm still learning.
Yeah.
But I think there's this tendency, a lot of times you're the leader because you can see it, that potential, that future, and you can also do it.
Right.
So some people have this sort of unicorn type of skill set or this ambidextrous skill set where you can see the vision, you can articulate the vision, but you can also execute the vision.
Yeah.
And I think that's a great thing to have, but it also becomes the barrier to growth very quickly.
It's a limiter,
because again, you can only do so much. And so a pastor will oftentimes serve as the visionary operator. Yeah. And that again becomes the bottleneck eventually. It's very helpful at day one.
Sure.
Not so helpful.
I think a healthy illustration that I've always tried to keep in my mind when I talk about like structure is our system, right? We're a body of systems, right? So if you're like anti-system, first of all, you're alive because you have systems, a nervous system, a breathing system. It's called something else, but there you read that thing. And so it's always helped me and I think as we talk about these processors and people that help us, if we overstacked in the processing side, like you were talking about, too many up front as a small church, that's what we're a growing small church. Like, if your bones grew faster than your skin did, we would all be really concerned with your life. Like we can see your bones, bro, and they're poking out of your body. That's not how it's supposed to go. Yeah. But then also there's that time in an organization and in your body, you've experienced this where you were growing physically and your bones ached because they wanted to grow, but there wasn't room yet for growth. And we call that growing pains. And so I think you're just embracing that, and we fight that sometimes as lead pastors. Like, it's okay that they're coming to us saying we need help in kids registration. It's not functioning. We're outgrowing it, or and we sometimes can hear that as like negative. You're just a negative Nancy. You're just anti us. And I think we just got to understand sometimes those processors, they bring so much value to the organization.
What's the problem is when they don't bring the problem to you.
Yeah, exactly. And what happens is then they just walk out.
Down, or the system just breaks down eventually. And now what was a success, when it reached that point, is now a failure. And we're at that point with some things in our church.
So back to my question.
Yes.
Your advisory council says, hey, you have $100K annual budget allotment, not including your salary, but $100K. Who are you going to hire?
Gotcha. I thought you were going to say, can I take a cruise or something? But no, that's not how you handle money.
Bonus, buddy.
Like what roles?
I mean, I'm convinced now in this 6 years later that we needed structure up front. So I would probably bring on an administrative assistant. We can't call them secretaries anymore, but people that understand and see, like they connect dots that I don't connect.
Yeah.
I would bring that person on. I would bring that person on first and then say, hey, youth pastor, hey, kids pastor, hey, music pastor, we have access to this individual who are going to make us better and create a different approach to, I don't know, like events, ministry, the whole thing would be shifted around getting the dots connected versus the big event. Because when we have big events and we do great big Easters and stuff, and when we don't have those systems in place, it almost feels like we didn't do it. It's like, well, we didn't do any follow-up or we didn't, and I've been burned by that.
So are you talking about an executive assistant or like an operations executive pastor?
Yeah,
or both. Like
probably both. As a small church, you probably could pay. You're doing 3 jobs, friend. You're taking all of this. You're answering phones, but you're also probably going to be managing operations, buildings, volunteer management as well. That's a big part of I think their role would be.
Yeah, I was going to say that the book we're reading right now, the Buy Back Your Time. I think they said it in that book. Whenever you were an entrepreneur just starting out, you wore a lot of hats, and that was okay.
Yeah.
And it's okay to ask your executive assistant or someone else on your team to also wear a couple hats.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's okay. You don't have to hire a specialist.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can hire someone who can do 2 or 3 things.
That's good.
And especially as a church starting out, your first hire. I've been a part of lots of churches, and I've seen youth pastors sit around all week, and I wonder, what do you pay a full-time salary to do? Like, you show up late, you do your Wednesday thing.
Yeah.
You have lunch in 1 day a week or something at a high school, but what else could you be doing that we're not reaping the benefit from right now?
Sure.
Or a worship pastor. I've been a full-time worship pastor, but I was also creative and web and communications because worship only takes up so much time when you're a certain size church.
Yeah, that's a true statement. Like, I think you're still going to have this person probably be wearing multiple hats.
Yeah.
We're talking about small organizations.
Yeah.
So they're going to probably be doing 2 or 3 things, but as long as those 2 or 3 things, the majority of them are in the processing lane, I think I would agree that would advance the church a little faster.
What he talks about in that book, Buy Back Your Time by, what's the author's name? Dan
Martell.
Dan Martell. Great book. I recommend it to every pastor. But what he talks about in that book is he said, and this spoke so much to me, he said, if you grew up with a challenging childhood, chances are you're very good as an entrepreneur.
Sure.
However,
because if you didn't eat, or you didn't get somebody to play with.
That comfort, though, in operating in chaos becomes prohibitive to further growth at some point.
Wow.
Because we all things are going normal. Things are smooth sailing, and we get uncomfortable because we only knew chaos growing up.
Interesting.
And so we will let things be chaotic because that's what we grew up in. And I thought that was such an interesting point. And so I think in that chapter, he's talking about delegation and having an assistant or adding other roles. And probably the best quote in the entire book was, because there's this saying, like, if I give it to somebody, it's like 80% right.
Gotcha.
And his quote was, 80% done is 100% awesome.
Yeah.
And I was like, highlight that.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, highlight that.
Yeah, because I would tell our staff, quite frequently when we were trying to lean in more to the processing side of things, look, your presentation can be a B- if your organization goes up. If your organizational skill, like it's okay this week if your presentation went down to a B-, but all of your volunteers knew what they were doing and all the resources were ready. The whole thing just averaged up.
Yep.
Like I would tell them that your stage presentation is phenomenal. It's all right if that falls down to a B- or B+.
Sure.
Maybe B+. Those type A people, B- is just too far down. Like B+, right? But they're taking that time away from that to go do something else that's bringing the whole average up.
Yeah. Well, it's a win for the team, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And maybe not as big of a win for you personally.
Right.
I mean, you're speaking.
And so, bro, that speaks to when you're talking about like chaos and stuff. Like I didn't have a traumatic life, but divorce is in my house and all. So there was some things you had to fight for. But I am realizing like I enjoy the chaos, like I do. And when it's like smooth sailing, I'm like, this is weird. Like, what are we not doing right?
Yeah.
Something's wrong.
Yep.
So I'm that guy I can attest to that being a true like statement. Like I sometimes get weirded out when it's normal or smooth sailing.
One of the other things he talks about in the book, we didn't plan on talking about this book so much, but our team's reading through it, and it's been great. But he talks about having a personal assistant or an executive assistant.
Okay.
And I didn't really see, at an organizational level, there are things, but the book makes this interesting case that I'd never thought about.
Okay.
And it made me realize that I've been missing out for like the past 10 years. But he said, you have to deal or handle, make decisions in your personal life while you're at work.
Yeah. Okay.
There's a lot of busy things, like our fridge broke down.
Yeah.
And we bought this house. It came with a nice big fancy fridge that didn't work really well. And so we spent money fixing it, spent more money trying to fix it, never fixed it. Finally, they said, hey, we want to charge you $5,900 to fix this fridge. And I told my wife, we could buy 2 fridges brand new.
Bro, you could buy me a fridge. Yeah.
I could buy everyone a fridge.
No joke. Good night.
So because it had been custom built in this like little section of the kitchen, we needed a very specific fridge. Now they're probably universal sort of dimensions.
Yeah.
But it's like a double wide fridge, and so I was gonna have to find a fridge. And it was right in the middle of reading this book, and this they were making the case, or Dan was making the case, like, hey, all these little personal things that you have to deal with day to day while you're at work disrupt your focus, disrupt your ability to do deep, meaningful work that the organizational needs. Now, it's stuff that has to get done in your personal life.
Yeah.
But so we live these sort of personal and corporate or career lives.
Yeah.
But if your personal is interrupting your productivity, then he makes the case that your executive assistant should be able to handle a lot of those things for you.
Gotcha.
And so I just had this like light bulb moment. I was like, I'm going to have my assistant find this fridge, because if I've got to look for this dumb fridge, I'm going to spend
4 hours searching online.
Over 2 days.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. I'm not motivated to look for a fridge or find a fridge. I'm going to be so distracted. I'm going to be going through tabs, checking my email, checking Slack, checking Twitter. I'm like, I can't find this dumb fridge.
Sure. It might even buy a lesser than fridge because you're not even focused on it fully.
My giftings are not like, I don't love research. Right. I prefer to be in the clouds, big picture. So I was like, I'm going to give this to her. And she found the fridge. She gave it to me. I literally, I gave her my credit card information. She paid for it. And I was like, where has this been? And so I began to give her a lot of my other personal things, paying bills. And what it did is it allowed me to have less interruptions during the workday.
Sure.
And I was able to just dive deeper on vision, on big picture stuff, on our strategy, on where we're headed as a team, as an organization. And it really just like, I don't know, it just...
All right, so I'm gonna hold you accountable.
Decluttered
if this
my
person
life.
starts going on like date nights for you in your personal life, and you've scheduled all these things.
She did schedule date nights.
Okay, scheduling is different. I'll tell you, going on these things so you could be in the office. I would be like, hey, bro, you got a little far there.
So check this out. She scheduled reservations at restaurants for the next 6 months. We've got my wife and I. We do date nights twice a month. Thursday nights. What? So she scheduled date nights.
Blowing my mind
and
here, bro.
She made all the reservations on Open Table, and then she sent, because our in-laws live with us, she sent our date nights calendar to my mother-in-law for her to put it on her calendar.
She got the kids. She's watching the kids. That's why.
Yes.
Yeah. That's why.
Yeah. So
just rubbing it in your mother-in-law's face. You're like, no, you got to watch the kids. Okay.
Hey, so
it's on the calendar.
Hey, my mother-in-law for Christmas gave me a coupon book. It was like redeem like date night.
No way.
I'm holding her to it.
That's awesome.
So now on date nights,
that's crazy.
I don't have to like spend time the day of. I don't have to like throw something together. I mean, that's typically not my style, but I don't even have to think about it. I literally open my calendar on my way home and go, oh, we're going to this restaurant.
Wow.
And we're doing this. And that has just added so much clarity to my focus. It's added so much value to my life, both personally and organizationally. And I'll say this, it's like National Admin Week next week. I already have give my executive assistant a little gift. I'm gonna write her a note, because here's what she's done. While a lot of people think, oh, executive assistant, that's like a marginal role, or that's a smaller role. She has made our entire organization better.
Gotcha.
By freeing me to be able to have focus on the most important issues and tasks
Interesting.
that only I can really address. Right.
No, sure.
And so I'm a big believer of the book, and it's really helped me just in the past 6 months.
Gotcha.
That's awesome. You can get started in that without having to spend a full-time salary, right? You can go like virtual assistant
1 day a week
and pay someone from Upwork or whatever just to help you manage something.
And I think that's what you're trying to say. Like, just do something that lane of adding a processor to your organization and your workflow, because it will give you exponentially time in your week to do things that, we were talking offline. The book that we read was Canoe in the Mountains. I can't remember the gentleman's name who wrote it, but it was talking about that very same concept that oftentimes as pastors, like, we get sucked into the whirlwind of working in the ministry that we never have time to work on the ministry.
Right. Yeah.
Like, you're busy and you're just, where you're in it and you got this and you got phone calls and, and as a pastor in a small church, you are wearing multiple hats, plus your dad, plus your husband, plus your all of these things. So the idea that you never get a chance to pull yourself out of the whirlwind enough to look at, and I guess what you're posing is, adding processors to the team early on, bringing people around you who can take you out of the whirlwind so you can work on, will just bring some exponential clarity to where the church is going and how the church can. Because I mean, just be real, like, as a small church, like, the budget, but this is what you're posing. Like, maybe the budget's been spent on a youth pastor or a kids pastor, and it should have been spent on an executive person up front. But as a small church, like, that's a retraining of the brain. That's what I think what we're talking about. Yeah.
I mean, I still think you need a youth leader and or pastor, whatever you call them, or a pastor probably is full-time, a youth leader is probably part-time, or volunteer. I still think you need important people in those roles. Yeah. But I don't know if I know today I would not spend a good portion of my budget allotment on youth and kids right away.
Gotcha.
I wouldn't.
Gotcha.
No. Our children's pastor, I mean, she handles children on Sundays. She spends a couple hours in the week prepping and equipping volunteers around her. Yeah. Using, curriculum that's done for you that gives you a plan. And then the rest of her time is on admin stuff for our church. So she's kind of admin for kids, putting it all together. Plus she kind of is the face of our elementary. Yeah. But she kind of administrates the other areas. And then she admins for the church, helping with, finances and processing offerings, and dual roles, similar type of mindset. Mm-hmm. But why not? Yeah,
we came at it backwards. So that's why our team is not heavy in the area of admin. And so we just recently are like, we're drowning administratively. Oh, this is why. And so I would concur that had we brought on a processor earlier on, someone who could have handled some of that, it wouldn't feel like we're drowning right now. And I mean drowning in the positive sense, like there's people coming and we've got follow-up to happen, and all of people are wanting to rent out the facility and do different things, and I am burdening an executive pastor, but I'm really wanting him to be focused on the processing of people management and not so much the administrative stuff. So I think doing it differently, I think was the question you asked me. Yeah. Would I do it differently? Yeah. I think because we're drowning now, I probably would have brought that person on a little bit earlier. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I hear that. And I would have, allocated some financials up front. Yeah. I agree.
What else is on your mind?
Yeah, man. Church struggles, church plant. I think growth is always a struggle. Gotcha. I mean, this whole conversation is kind of about that growth, the processes, the systems. We're finally at a point in our church. We were able to buy our building. I think we've talked about that before.
It's a great story.
It's really cool how God opened that up for us. But it's a cool blessing, and it's a little bit of a limiting, stretching kind of blessing. I think it's a blessing in disguise that we have this building, but we're at capacity with this building now. So God is a part of in our county, like sewer and water is a big deal for our county, like to do any things. We've got space to knock out a wall and build, but we had to overcome that hurdle. So God opened a really cool door. We were able to tie into the neighborhood behind us, and we just finished hooking up sewer and city water now. And now that's not a factor. Yep. Now it's getting approval for, hey, we've got 3,000 square feet, but we need to make it almost 6.
Wow.
And we need our sanctuary space to go from seating 60 to seating 130.
Yeah.
And getting approval for that.
Gotcha.
So last Sunday we had 2 open chairs in our sanctuary.
Praise the Lord.
This Sunday was a very similar situation. People were moving chairs around and trying to, how can we've maxed out the space.
So good.
So it's this weird tension of this is really cool. This is really bad.
Yep.
Because first time guests walked in 3 Sundays ago and had to sit on the front row.
Yeah.
So then it's this, okay, now we're training our people that come early. Hey guys, we love you. You know each other.
Yes.
We need you to move up. We need you to fill the row. Don't leave an empty seat next to you. Just pack it out.
Yeah.
Because when a guest does walk in 10, 15 minutes late to church,
they can't be.
They should not have to walk in front of the whole church and hi, you don't know me, and they sit on the front row. How awkward. Thank God they were churched people and it wasn't a huge deal to them. But had it been the opposite, sorry, you had to sit on the front row. That's awkward.
Right.
So it's a weird season. It's a cool season. I mean, as your church has grown, you're in a really cool space, a shopping center.
Yeah, we've learned all kinds of weird stuff we had to do differently. I've never been in a shopping center church, and that's where we find ourselves.
Yeah, parking's a big deal.
Yes, we got a Subway and a bank and a nail salon that are open and a donut shop. And so, we share parking, and it's sometimes a nightmare. And the pains of a growing church is what that's a good way of describing it. So we've had to learn how to coexist with these other businesses. And you do that through relationship, of course. You have to build relationship, as you guys are having to do with the city. Building relationship with the city.
And now we got to come up with money, right, to build this thing.
Gotcha.
God's given us this vision. We've mapped it out. We've planned it. And my dad has always had the mindset that I don't want to lead our church into debt if I don't have to.
Amen.
It can be a struggle. It can be a burden. We have to make this payment every week, and then you get focused on the money. And so he's like, you know what? I believe there's enough here.
Yeah.
And we're not a church of millionaires, but we're a church of givers.
Gotcha.
Our giving for our size of church is, when we have guests that come in and speak and they leave with an offering, they're like, did y'all pad this? Like, did y'all make this up? I'm like, no, our people gave you X number of dollars. That's what they just gave sacrificially. And so we've been saving since we started the church. We opened a savings account 8 years ago, and we've put money in, and every once in a while I'll talk about the building fund, and that's just where it stays. And we had a little over $20,000 in the bank. Just okay. Well, someone in our church, God bless them with a situation here recently, and came up to my dad 2 weeks ago and said, God told us to give the church $50,000.
Wow.
I'm like, whoa.
Praise God.
So good.
So it's just one of those things, like, you just trust God along the way. Don't obsess over the details and don't try to figure it out. Like, if God told you something, just trust him. Because now we've got $70,000 or $76,000 in the savings, which is enough to do our slab and get the frame up for the new part. Yeah. It's not enough to finish it and sheetrock it and make it pretty and buy new sound stuff or whatever we need. But right now it's enough to do the next thing we need to do after we get approval.
People see the progress.
And when we planted our church, God gave me a vision just similar to that. I was standing at a bank of water and there was fog, and we were told to plant a church. We didn't know what the next step looked like. But as we moved our foot, and the fog began to clear, and there was a stone in the water. It's like, hey, we can stand here, and now there's certainty here, but there's still uncertainty all around us. Yeah. What's our next step?
Sure.
Well, God said move, so we started moving, and the fog cleared again, and there you've got the next step. So just every step of a church journey, growth, planting, wherever you're at in a church, just be bold and take the step, and then watch God show up underneath your foot with what he promised. And he'll surprise you every time.
I think because we can get so distracted by like having to have it all figured out, and I got to see it all, that comes, it does. And God brings people around you to help you equip those moments, but just to be able to trust in the Lord.
There's an element of faith, right?
Yeah, man, that's what it's all about. Your faith. That's good.
What's interesting to me, or even frustrating to me, is that you can have a church that has great processes, like we've been talking about, great systems. You're doing everything right at an organizational level. You have a lot of organizational health. The leadership team is healthy, and you have 2 chairs left.
Yeah.
But a building or your location becomes the lid, essentially. It's not a human lid. Yeah. It's
just a physical.
It's a physical
barrier.
Yeah. Physical barrier. And I was thinking about this, like a great church can be hindered by its location or building.
Yeah.
A poorly ran church, though, cannot be helped by a great building.
It's good.
It cannot. No. Our church is very imperfect, but we were averaging like 140 people 2 summers ago, and we had 1,300 people on Easter.
Incredible.
And you know what the difference is?
You moved.
We moved.
Yeah. Change locations.
I mean,
so
the new
crazy.
location is an amazing location, and the story is full of hardships and trial and error and resilience, I would say, on the pastor's part. But location is important. Anybody else who tells you otherwise is lying through there.
But you had a good church, because I watched through COVID when y'all lost your facility. Mm-hmm. And literally became the Israelites roaming the desert, trying to find a home.
Can we have church in your church?
Exactly.
Yeah, like Mary and Joseph.
Yeah, bro, I remember that. Just wandering. And I was like, bro, how are they? And it was a testament to the systems and the connections that y'all had, and that it was more than the building. Y'all's church has always been more than a building.
Yeah.
And so there was a great church all along that needed that, explosive moment in a facility on the highway. Like, that location is beautiful. But it was a great church all along. Yeah. To stay together the way y'all did was inspirational. Like, we watched from a distance, inspirational, how y'all were able to gather and still maintain. Because there were so many people that wasn't the case in that season. And so it was inspirational. But that's, again, testament to there was a great church in that church all along. And the location unlocked some stuff. It just revealed who y'all were already.
Yeah.
Had the church, not been a great church and moved in, bro, it would have been a nightmare. I mean, we've just talked personally about the financial burden and the cost and like you said, the trials of getting to that place.
Yeah, I was a part of a church who did that. They were a great church. They expanded. They were busting out the seams. Were there for decades and decades. They needed to do something.
Sure.
They built a building, went massive into debt, moved into this massive structure, and the church just kind of
yikes.
Did this. Location didn't help that church.
Yeah.
It could not sustain. It didn't have the systems and the structure. They were just kind of one of those churches that did church, and
interesting. Yikes.
They grew to kind of exceed what they had.
Sure.
But it was an established church. They had history. It was one of those situations, and they thought the new building was going to explode growth.
Yeah.
And it hindered growth because now they had a several $1,000 a month. Tens of thousands of dollars a month payment every month to make.
Wow.
So it's not like they had the money to do the ministries they were doing anymore or the big events. It was like, well, we got $20,000 to pay every month to a note. And the church just kind of ground to a halt, and had a new pastor and the whole thing since. But still, the building didn't help.
Sure. Could that have been resolved had somebody alongside of him said, "Hey, we don't need to build this big of a thing yet. We need to
this is
size it
real big.
Yeah, we need to size it up." Yeah. The testament of having a processor around.
Yeah, exactly. Would have been huge.
Sure.
A trusted voice that said, "I know where you want to go, but let's take this step first."
Sure.
Yeah. The vision can be huge, but you accomplish it step by step. Day by day.
I've launched that. I've cast that net, and people are like, I ain't getting under that. You don't know what you're doing. Okay. Yeah, you're right. I don't.
Polls to support it.
I just have a big vision, but I don't know what I'm doing. That's good, man.
This has been great, guys.
Yeah, bro.
Enjoyed our conversation.